I'd like to introduce you Maxim Surkov, who's going to tell you about applying pixel art. So, yeah, welcome, Maxim.
So, hello everyone. My name is Maxim Surkov. Let's start from a few words about my background. I'm a student. I'm a third-year student currently, and my mainly focus is actually 3D modeling and 3D art. Maybe some of you remember my previous lecture. Maybe some of you were there. No?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have been doing 3D modeling for a long of time, but for pixel art, it's kind of a new thing for me. I started about half a year ago, and actually it's turned out to be a very interesting style. And why I actually turned my interest to the pixel art, because it's a really simple thing. When you're doing a 3D game, you have two states. You have a bad graphics and a good graphics. And if the game has bad graphics, the player actually will recognize it as a bad game. And to make a good graphics, actually, you will need a really good graphics team. So you need a lot of people to make art. And actually, then you're developing a game alone or in a team of 2 or 3 people. It's not possible. So we have pixel art. It's a very interesting 2D art style that allows us to make good games. So what's the motivation behind pixel art? It does not take much resources to produce, as I said. So you can just draw a few pixels and you have a sprite. You have a character animated. And yet it's still a very nice, a very distinctive and cool visual style. So you can say about a pixel art game that it has a bad graphics, that actually will do some silly thing. And the resulting products, this is games, they are very lightweight. So they do not take much space on the hard drive of the player, and does not require a lot of performance. So we don't need GTX 1080 to run the pixel art game. And what is mainly important for us as programmers, as developers, it actually allows us to concentrate on much more important things than graphics. That is the game logic, the gameplay. That's much important for the player as graphics. And that's what we as developers can give it. Some clarification about misconceptions. I can start making pixel art right away and it will be good. Well, generally you can try it, because if you have some art background, traditional art or digital art background, but you still need to you still need some notions about the shadowing, about the light, about how the objects are actually formed. But in the pixel art you have much more freedom in sense of shapes, and we will come to it later again. Pixel art is just downscaled clip art. Now, if you just try to downscale a clip art, you'll get really a mess, and I'll also show it later. Yes, it's a distinctive art style, which is actually have some methods to draw it. Quick into tools. The main tool I used for most of the slides is actually Sprite. It's a cool pixel art editor, which I really like personally. Maybe you have heard of Graphics Gale. Yes, it's also a good software, but I haven't used it. My main focus is Sprite, because you'll see why. Unreal Engine. Also, there's a Unity, also a great engine. I use both of them. Actually, it doesn't matter for us in this lecture which game engine we use. Magic Voxel, also a cool tool, which allows us to make voxel art. Voxel art is also another field of graphics, but I tried to work on the voxels, and I didn't really like how the scenes look. Because you really need more voxels to make it good, to make it for a game. And talking about the voxel animation, it's even more problematic. Also, we can use some additional useful stuff. I'll show you the Adobe Color, nice online tool for checking palettes, and GIMP. We can use it for some transformation of art, and we'll also use it for creating normal maps for a pixel art game. In the beginning, I'll reference this cool book that's called Pixel Art for Game Developers. It's a really nice and extensive book describing the techniques. It describes the methods how you can create. And we'll just cover a few topics from these books, just some basics. This is a nice book. It's easy to read. It doesn't require much attention, and it's really just you can read it in free time and you'll be happy. So let's start from a really basics. How to draw lines. Personally, a long time ago, I was always when I got used to some Paint, Microsoft Paint, I was really afraid of this kind of lines. I thought they have too much gaps and they cannot be like lines. So I was really afraid of drawing them. And instead of that, I tried to draw them like this. And actually it turns out to be a ladder instead of a line. And I was really frustrated because either I am afraid of line with gaps, and I'm frustrated with the ladder. So in the pixel art, we should use and we must use the pixel perfect, so-called pixel perfect lines, which are uniform and have gaps. They actually, when you draw a whole composition using these lines, or for example also the more diagonal line, more skewed line, it's also uniform and has gaps. You'll see that in a whole composition these lines look very much better than the ladders actually. And the same goes for drawing circles and some kind of curves. So you should not be afraid of giving a few more breaks for this. So as you can see, we have made more gaps here. We've broken that side and that side into more connections. So we have, and as you look as a whole, you can see that this picture is much better than this. And the same goes for the curve. So don't be afraid of drawing gaps. That's a really vital thing to know. Anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is some kind of a technique to make, initially to make pixel art or some kind of a pixelated image to look more sharp. You can see that I've drawn the little dog here, just a couple of seconds, and applied, actually I'm drawn this anti-aliasing manually. It can look kind of strange, but you get the idea. So we, instead of drawing solid black and white, we can use some shades on the contours. And if you look, the anti-aliasing actually used in the games. You can see in the modern 3D games, we've probably seen this setting for anti-aliasing. And this is supposed to make lines less breaking, so they should look more sharper as a whole. But personally, I don't really like anti-aliasing because it really reminds me of old legacy games, where they used a lot of color ramps, lots of anti-aliasing. Because the main goal for the old games was to make, not just to make pixel art, they wanted to make more high resolution picture with all the pixels we've got. So they have huge limitations and have goal for creating high resolution picture. Today we have much powerful computers, and we don't need to. We can make just a high resolution picture. We don't need to try to make the pixel art just a high resolution by, for example, anti-aliasing or using more pixels. Actually, the whole pixel art is about when you can count pixels on the image. So, just a cool thing to know that anti-aliasing can make some things look different. And another vital topic, the palettes. The palettes are actually the set of colors that you can use for your game. So, as you can see, I have included 2 examples. Actually, there are lots of palettes. And this is the 4-bit palette. Yes, the n-bit palette gives you 2 power of n colors. So, for example, we have 4-bit color, we have 16 colors. Yes, and for the 8-bit palette, we have 256 colors. Actually, these you should understand that these palettes are chosen by their developers. So you can make your own palettes from various colors. You can make a whole 4-bit palette only from shades of gray, for example, just black to white, and that will be the whole palette. So you can choose colors for your palette yourself. And so, as you can see, I've created a little palette with only shades of gray, and that's not actually the whitest thing, because we need more darker palette here, and I also included additional super white color. And let's start with a simple example, drawing a boot. So we start with taking some kind of the middle tone. We create a base of it. I just scratch a very rough shape. Then I take the contour. I created this hole and this outline with a black shade. And now you can work with the light. So this comes to the point that you actually need some studying of the actual images, some art, not only the pixel art to understand the shadowing and the lights. So we have here the contours with a light, indicating that this is kind of the reflections of the light. And so, just using a few colors, we can draw some kind of object already. Yes, this is also the wonderful tool which I wanted to show you. This is called Adobe Color. It's let me see. Yes. So you can just go for a color Adobe. This is a really cool set of palettes. So you can see that here we have a color wheel, and we can make some palette and just assign a few more colors to it. But what's more interesting, we have a huge collection of colors here. For example, we want to create a sky, which will be later in this lecture. We just put sky, and here we have a huge selection of palettes which have names: sky, nature, rainy sky, which we can use to create objects. This is really a cool feature. So we can just download these palettes and use them for our purposes. Actually, that's free for download. Yes, but it doesn't matter because there's the colors. The colors are not licensed or anything, because you can take just color picker and take all these colors to your project. So getting back to our lecture. So another example for our palettes. So again, we starting very simply. We just get 2 colors. It's a dark blue and more light blue. We create a color ramp. For example, in Sprite it's made just a few clicks. We don't get deep into it right now. We create this beautiful gradient, the color ramp. When you take blue, when you take dark color, white color, just in case we need it, because gradients and colors are good, but we usually need some white and black for the light and dark. so we can take them always. Also, we have this nice gradient of slightly gray color, and this one we'll be using for the clouds. The blue one we are using for the sky, actually. So let's start drawing the sky by just dropping whole palette into the image. So we have created strips of the light, the white line, and from it's not actually pixels are not that big. It's actually 128 by 128. So example for this line is some like 4 or 8 pixels, I don't remember. So we have these strips, nice strips, and put them into this kind of arrangement. Next we can continue drawing our image. I just took the dark brush and just sketched the line, just a random line across the bottom, so it would resemble some kind of a trees or something, I don't know. I just took white color and draw some sparks in the light. That kind of looks much better. Now we can add the moon. I just took a round brush. I just took the white color and at first the core, then I reduced the transparency and on and on. So we have several cycles for the moon. Now we can add some stars. Actually, it's really important when you're drawing something in pixel art and you cannot imagine how the object should look. The first thing you should do is actually look for a reference. It doesn't have to be necessary pixel art, because if you copy some pixel art from the web, you are actually in a very danger to catch their style, because you should be following your own style in your project, because the style consistency is very important. And then you are researching for references, you should know that copying the other style and missing styles in one game, for example, this character looks like sticks and this character looks like 4 pixels only. That would be really strange. It will be really awful to see. So you should be very consistent in your style. That's why I recommend to go on references like real world, for example. And here I show you that I wanted to I wanted to know how the stars look. Actually, I have a notion that they can look like just dots or squares, but in reality they may look like some kind of these shapes. And as you can see in the final image, this looks kind of better than just squares. Also, we need some variation of the sizes and nice distribution. So what we're going to do next is draw some clouds, actually. Yes, drawing clouds is actually really simple, but in most things, in most projects that I saw, some clouds, they looked very strange, and I don't know why. Because it's not rare that you look something, even at your own artwork, and you don't understand why it is bad. So this idea of what things are off and what things are good actually comes with experience. And by taking experience, I mean going, for example, in the web and looking for the references for the real art, just looking at the artworks, the pixel art, the actual games. It's important to look at the real games because they're successful, and you want to take their art style, not just to take that, just to understand how do they work in their, how do they work with their characters, with their objects and scenes. So as you can see, I'll just explain how I created this cloud. I just started with really white image, real white color, and just outlined the really rough shape for it, and it looked like white mess. Next, as you can see, we have a light source here. So we should note that the object should have a huge part of the light coming from its side. Also, there's some light coming on our side because the density of the cloud is less here, and that effect is really important to know. So we just don't have white here, the light, but we also can have it here to make it look better. So next we add a darker color, and going to the bottom we add more darker colors. So just for example, like 4 colors, in 4 colors we can create the simple cloud. So do you find this cloud good or just as bad? What's your opinion?
I think it's good.
Okay. Yes. So, and can you see what we're missing here? So, what can we add to this picture to make it look more? Yes, that's correct. I didn't expect it actually, but it's correct. We need more clouds.
I think you should remove the single pixels and gather it to the clusters.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
I mean that single pixels in the cloud are looking not so good. I mean, we need to make less clusters to make it one big shape, not. И выделять, короче, ее маленькие пиксели, которые справа, типа они одиночные и выглядят плохо. Да, да.
You're talking about this?
Оно похоже на растеризацию, типа способ шейдинга в пиксель-арте, но именно тут оно выглядит плохо, по-моему.
I don't understand which pixels. That pixels or?
On the bottom left.
On the border, yeah, on the left bottom.
Border
We have a bit of pixels just out of the cloud.
You mean this?
No, never mind, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I intended to make clouds non-uniform because then they look uniform. They look like a big piece. And I actually tried. Actually, then the cloud was finished. I took. I don't remember how this tool is called in Sprite, which just crushes. Then you apply it. It just creates a mess, a little mess in the pixels. So this, for example, these things I created with this brush. Actually intended to do this. It depends on the style, but thank you for your note. Also, we have the nice technique that is called dithering, and dithering is actually some kind of the gradient which is applied to the pixels. So, as you can hear, you can see here, this is a screenshot from the Sprite. We have no dithering. This is just a plain gradient. So here we can have these kind of gradients. So these are like interlacing pixels that creates this effect. I've seen this kind of technique in lots of legacy games, so older games use their technique. And I also wanted to use it, for example, in our previous scene. So I applied it to it. So you can see this is the same scene, but with a dithering. So how do you think, which one is better, the dithering variant or the regular variant? Actually, I think that both are kind of similar in their user experience. Okay, Tilesets. Just a small notion. Who knows about the Tilesets? Okay, good. The Tilesets are just then I first started doing my pixel art projects. I really needed to make the scene as a whole because I had a strong feeling that this should be an art. And the funny story behind this scene is that before creating this scene in pixel art, I made it in the actually high resolution art with Krita, and then I not downscale, but based on this sketch, I've created this scene. This very, very, very redundant. You don't really need references before. You don't really need to create prototypes before doing these kind of levels. And the thing here is that this particular scene is a whole piece. So you can see that I just created a brush of the wall and filled the whole image with it. Also created the shadows. But as a whole, it looks good. It's completely not scalable at all, not flexible. For example, if you want to create more similar levels, you cannot do anything with it. So we have tilesets. Tilesets are actually have you have a definition here: a collection of assets broken up into a uniform grid. So you can have some kind of map, a set, and put this set, for example, is divided into 64 by 64 pixels each, and we just take these tiles and put it in tile map. And what's the use of it? Yes, by the way, this tile set has a lot of free space, so you can put a lot of objects from different scenes, or just make smaller tile sets. We can just take this tile set and using, for example, like just create the separate tiles the same scene. So I've recreated this scene in Unreal Engine. Well, we have a small problem here, because on the initial picture, initial scene, I've also created the shadows in the way that I wanted to. But in case of the tile map, this is called the tile map. Then we take the tile set, individual pieces of tile set, and drop it into a map, creating a whole image, the resulting image. So in the tile map, we really need something to make shadows. And we'll talk about shadowing in the later slides. So another example, this is creating seamless tile. This is also made in Sprite, and as you can see, Sprite has a nice editor that allows us to view not only the this blue circle is actually the actual tile, and the seamless tiles are just when we put these tiles like in this arrangement, they look like as a whole piece. And we need seamless tiles to make huge levels, some kind of the backgrounds or walls, and just to putting less effort, we can create one tile and just spawn it along the scene. So here we have this example of creating the seamless tile. So I've started with just taking this tile and filling it with some squares, some shapes, and that's it. Now we add some background to it, some dark color in the seams. Now we can add some light. This is the example for the pre-painted lighting, when we can have just the light completely drawn on the actual picture. Also adding the shadow. As you can see, previously we added this light bleeding on the edge and some shade coming from another edge. Also we can add some dust, just blur it, and that's the very simple tile we can use already in our games. But what's the problem with seamless tiles? For example, if you're this is problem also applies hugely applies to 3D modeling of landscapes. When you have a texture of some, for example, grass, you want to make a field full of grass. When you just take the seamless texture and put it tiled along the object, and it really looks like a repeating pattern, and that's what we are doing. But we really don't want to get rid of this effect, because when you have a repeating pattern, that's the eyes have no place to rest on, and the final scene looks very awful. So we need some way to make seamless tiles, some backgrounds created as seamless tiles look less tiring for the player. So let's just take a resulting tile, drop it into a tile set. It's a 32 by 32 tile. And just as a starting point, we can add some edges for this tile. Actually, these small pieces are taking the whole 32 by 32 cell. That's kind of a resource taken, but it's our trade-off. Of course, we can make the tiles more smaller. For example, we can divide this tile into like four squares, so we can have like more modular things. That's a trade-off between the tile size and actually the object sizes. So you can the one tile can take up to as long as you want tiles. So you're not limited by one cell. And this is example just making some edges. As you can see, I just taken my color picker and picked these edge colors and created some outlines for this. But as a result, this looks more natural. And with this, you can already create something like this. So you just put a few tiles, put these edge tiles, and as a result, it looks kind of the whole piece. It looks very solid. But as you can already see, and you'll see it in a more large scale, that this is tiring for the player to see repeating patterns. So we want to get rid of this. This is another example which I created a long time ago. As you can see here, you have shadows, but what is more important, we have variations of tiles. So this is not a completely solid pattern. For example, we have a little brick missing here and brick missing here. In this example, this is drawn completely on a whole picture, but we want to introduce the same effect of variation into the tile set. So we can just add a few more tiles with more variations. So for example, this is the same tile, just with another introducing more details, and we can use it randomly to create more tiring images. So for example, I put all these tiles into one piece, and we can already use it in some scene as a background. Of course, just using this background is kind of also tiring, but it is much more interesting than just a single tile mapped along the image. And we really need to add some more objects, something happening on the image to make it look better. And this is the topic that I'm coming to. This is a composition trick. We're not going to get deep into the composition because it's a huge topic of like a traditional art and pixel art as well, 3D art. But I want to tell you about this really nice trick, the composition trick. That's called primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes. I guess it's not something like invention. It's a very lifelike thing, and it's just formally described by Neil Blevins. That's artist in, I guess, Pixar. So, has anyone heard about the primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes rule? Nobody? Actually, there is a real nice talk about the famous Blender artist, the Gleb Alexandrov. He has this. He's talking about this topic. Has a whole lecture about it. It's called "How to Make Your Art Outstanding" or something like this. But the thing is, he's pointing to the huge error in the art of many people, and he describes it as why some artworks get into the top and some art don't receive any attention at all. So I've sketched this little, some kind of abstract building, and what is the something looks really off, but what exactly? So why is this building look so plain, so not interesting? So what's your thoughts about it? Why does it look so plain?
It's hard to see walls. You can see these white things, no about it. But the walls, they should be darker.
No, it's not. You're thinking about top-down view, or?
Я имею в виду, что стены очень тонкие, очень, с глаза, с пола их вообще не видно.
Это не вид сверху, это сбоку. It's just a very abstract building. So we have entrance here, the door, some kind of more darker wall. This the top floors with some windows. Do you see it now? I hope so.
It's just hard to see because of the light, I think.
Okay, I can go to the, for example, a sprite, maybe. Is it? Don't remember. So sadly, I don't have it in my recent tab, but I don't think it will make much difference. So this is just a very gray building. We're not talking about the colors right now. We are talking about compositions. So we can translate this image into these shapes. The primary shapes are the biggest shapes, the secondary shapes are medium, and tertiary shapes are the smallest shapes. And we have created the primary shapes as blue, the secondary shapes as yellow, and the tertiary shapes as orange. And here we can see that the composition is really plain. We have some arrangement in this side, some few shapes here, but mostly it's very plain, and the details appear only in some sides. So let's add more details. Bad distribution of shapes. We have added more details, but what's wrong this time? It's really tiring to see. What?
Too much detail.
Actually, it's like not too much details, but more of the details are everywhere. And this is the same thing that goes for completely seamless tiles tiled on the, for example for a grass tiled along a huge plane. That's a very repetitive pattern. And this is, I has no place to rest on. This is a huge of very uniform distribution. A really like pattern. So let's go for the real world and examine it, how the real world actually looks. And also we can do this with some good artworks. For example, if you go to the art station, yes, a small break from the topic, how you can search for references. So it's a good idea to search for references. I personally like the ArtStation. So how many of you heard of the ArtStation before? Nice. So this is a place for characters, or for artists, which publish their drawings all the time. And here are some more high-detailed 3D art. The main restriction of the ArtStation is that you cannot publish photographs. You can only publish artwork created by human or by some maybe algorithm, but not photographs. So we'll just search for pixel art. The topic, which is primary, secondary, tertiary shapes, is applied also as in the pixel art, also in the real world, and in the digital paintings, in 3D art. It's used everywhere, and you have to know it because it's really important. And for example, just going for reference in pixel art, we can search it here, and there are lots of examples in the ArtStation. So we can have, this is some tiles, some characters. So you can just look at this style of these artists. You can comment. It's like a social network for artists, something like that. That's a really nice place to look for references.
I think you can't comment until you don't prove your portfolio.
Actually,
Or not.
I see a lot of shitty art there. So
I think you can just register and you have access to it.
You need to put some work to доказать, что ты художник.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that procedure because
Если ты ничего не запостил, то ты можешь только досматривать.
okay, I just didn't notice because I published some works already before doing some stuff. Maybe because of this I didn't notice this rule. Okay, so let's return to our topic of primary, secondary, tertiary shapes. So we have sketched these shapes in this kind of image. This image I took from another resource called Pixabay. Why I use Pixabay sometimes but not Google Photos? Because Pixabay provides free stock images that are not obliged by some copyright. And you can safely take images on Pixabay. Also, I just want to show it. Pixabay.
How about taking art from ArtStation?
What?
How about taking art from ArtStation?
But it's art already. Yes, in the ArtStation you are taking some references, but they are actually just taking art from it would be stealing, because it's they're copyrighted maybe. I didn't see the explicit copyright, but they are created by people, and actually there's some license, I guess. So you cannot just take some art from this ArtStation, use it just for the reference. For example, if you really don't know how to draw, just take some character and change it in the way you want, but don't just copy-paste things from it, which doesn't go for this the same image there is. The Pixabay is just like Google Photos, but the images in it are like free stock photos, and you can just take all these images and use in your projects free and as you want. So all the images here are not are actually completely free. There are not huge variations. It's not extensive as Google Photos, but for example, if I wanted to create a game just of some images, I can take these images directly and put it in my game. It will be okay. So it's free. This license is called Creative Commons 0 license. This is useful. You can search textures with this kind of license. And for example, this picture is also this Creative Commons 0 license. So let's return to our topic again. I've just sketched these shapes, and as you can see, notice the distribution of the tertiary, secondary shapes. They are kind of the distribution uniformly, but not filling the whole screen space. And as you, if you look on these, I really recommend you to go through the Gleb Alexandrov lecture, which I put a link in the references on this lecture. I'll give these slides to you, and you can see some references and cool articles and cool speaks. And in the speaks of Gleb Alexandrov talks about how similar the distribution of very good artworks looks. So if you take some cool artwork and just, that's not artwork but a photograph, if you just sketch it in these kind of shapes, you'll notice the distribution is very similar among all of them. We have some big primary shape, then we have some kind of the secondary shapes which are spread along these primary shapes, not in the side, not in some like for example on this side only the tertiary shapes, only in this side some secondary shapes. They're uniformly distributed, and actually the person who formalized it, the Neil Blevins, I guess it's he's called it, you need to have nice distribution of shapes. But what is nice, you have to actually understand. For example, like seeing this drawing. So I recommend you to go through the references and look at more and more sketches like this, so you can understand what's the distribution, what is actually considered as nice distribution. And applying this distribution to pixel art, we have created some uniform shapes in the sides. They are not repetitive. They are just spread uniformly along the primary shapes, and the tertiary shapes are spread along the secondary shapes. It is not necessary for the tertiary shapes to be only on the secondary shapes. You can just have it anywhere you want. But does anyone start to understand what's the distribution am I talking about? So what's the nice distribution? Is it? I guess if you look at more, like if you Google or watch the references, you'll see these kind of sketches of these shapes and understand what I'm talking about. But already this is a huge difference from the image that we saw before. So this is much better than this. This is much better than this, because already it kind of resembles some art. And finally, we have to draw something. So can you see a building more explicit right now? Or is it the same as before? What's your thoughts? Does it look better? Does it look worse? Does it look strange? Kind of abstract drawing I just created a couple of minutes. Just to show the idea that the distribution is really important. You can notice that I didn't sketch very, very much details. I just sketched the details which are kind of stands out as the picture. Which is the windows and some big shapes like the ball and this kind of the section. So this is kind of important to see. Animations. So actually it would be good to understand the animations. You really need to draw them. But if you'll start to draw animations right now, it will take some kind of about several hours because animations are difficult. And unlike regular art, like if you want to play some pixel art game, you can just stand and see how the background looks, how the pixels. You can just literally count the pixels. For example, I play this game, I see this building is like 6 by 8 pixels, and I can just kind of take this idea, just create my buildings of same size, and for example another object. You can see it. But in animations, the animations are actually made so that they create an illusion of motion, and you cannot just play the game and see that the animation is like exactly 8 frames, or like that's the movement. You really need to see all the frames of the animations. And sadly, I have hard time finding real games animations on the web. So I just googled some animations from like game X, and I couldn't find it. Only if I take like recording. That's with pixel art, you are actually free to record your game and just split it into frames yourself, and you'll see all the frames, because there are not much frames, like 8 frames. You can just sketch it from the video and you get the frames, but it's much harder. And also along with the problem that you don't see the frames, you really need to think about how the image changes, how the actually object moves. For example, in the walking character, so the question is how to start from nowhere. The nowhere, I mean, the no notion about the animations, no idea. I just see the moving picture. I want to create a moving picture. I just want to create animation. But how to start? I found a cool reference. This one I called "Start from a Stickman." Actually, I also tried it, and I created a whole, not the really extensive, but a complete animation set for a character. This is starting from a stickman. So you can find, for example, Google stickman animation jumping, stickman jumping. For example, the stickman is idea of a simplistic animation. So you cannot just take, for example, a character. For example, if you want to use as a reference a 3D game, you cannot just take the character and see how for example, the arms and legs are moving. But with the simple shape as the stickman, you can just see. And in this reference, I also included it in the link for this for the slides. You can see how the stickman actually looks. So how this is the front leg, how this is moving alongside. And what's the simplest thing they can do is just take this kind of thing. Yes, it actually applies some style, but it's much less style because you're creating a whole character on top of that. For example, if you're completely unaware how to make them. So a quick example, just taking the single frame and, for example, drawing some random character, like exactly like this. And as a result, you will have a decent animation already. Of course, you can just add more variations, change the dimensions, make it less tall, make it more wide, but it still will be an animation which you can use. So drawing on top of a stickman. That's the first method. That's actually a tile set which I created for the whole movement. And probably you cannot see this, but I actually created the movement for the right and movement for the left side separately. Why I've done this? Because in many guides and tutorials I saw that they create, for example, a walking animation on the right and they just mirror it on the left. But I wanted to introduce more details, more variation in the animations, and I created from the one side of the character. The idea here is that the character is not like symmetric. He had some piece of the cloth on the one side of him, and when he moved to the left, this piece of cloth was visible, and by moving to the left, this piece was invisible. And this small detail actually makes a lot of difference into the actual visual style. Another cool technique is rotoscoping. The rotoscoping is just downscaling the image? No. If you downscale the image, you'll get some crap. The rotoscoping is just, in this example, actually this is some kind of the algorithm that uses rotoscoping, but we're not talking about algorithms right now. you can use some video reference and some kind of a downscale it, but you need to take some effort to make to refine this downscaled character. And for example, this technique was used in a Prince of Persia game in 1989. I guess the director's brother doing some acrobatics, and you can see that it's not just downscaled, but it was very much refined by artists. But this the idea is the rotoscoping is actually used in real projects. So it's used in 1989, and which is a fantastic thing that I discovered that is that's used in the upcoming game called the Last Night. I'll show it. Show some footage from it at the end of the lecture. The game Last Night also uses the rotoscoping technique for the characters. And why do we need a rotoscoping? For example, this studio actually had some artists to make animations, but they wanted to get into the realistic animations. So they wanted to make it much more realistic, and so that's why they use this reference. And actually, that's a real reference for the game. I guess this video is called a real footage for the animation creation. Yes, and you can see that's that video. Just lots of refinement, lots of tweaking, lots of work, but actually it can be even much more work than just creating animation. But the result is fantastic. Downscaling, yes, what I talked. I just took this picture and downscale it, and does it look like some kind of a character? I guess not. It just looks like some blurry thing. So if you want to create the knight armor, you just need to go. Of course, you can start with downscaled image as a reference and just draw on top of this reference. But to make it look good, you actually need to draw it by hand. Actually, yes, that was the second style, the rotoscoping, and the first technique is just drawing animations. You need to examine the games, a lot of games, to see how the animations are made. So this is some footage from the Terraria game. How many of you heard of the Terraria? Maybe played? Oh, fantastic. I really love Terraria personally. It's a fantastic universe. And the Titan Souls, also. The Terraria is older than Titan Souls, much older, I guess. But the idea here is that you can just take these footages and go into editor and examine them. And yes, actually I have some animation. Let's just go and see how do you examine the images. So we have a sprite here, and I hope at least that we have I hope that we have it. For example, excuse me for a minute. Just going to get more. I just really want to show you this example. Just got out of my scope. Okay, just yes, I found it. This is also a cool reference from a game, upcoming game, which I really expecting to be released. I'll also tell a little story about it. Yes. So I don't know, just the GIF that's from this game. It's called The Siege and the Sand Fox. It's really does anyone heard about this game? The Siege and Sand Fox. This is really hard to notice this game actually, but it's really wonderful. And actually, the Unreal Engine have some tutorials on their plugin, the Paper 2D, which is not kind of a developer right now because they're focusing on 3D, a lot of 3D stuff. But they invited this developer from the studio which makes the Siege and the Sandfox to make some tutorials on the Paper 2D on their official channels, and also include the links to their studio. They have a channel on YouTube, and they're making some play tests. Also recently they started to make some study of games, so they look at different games and discover their style. But here I want to show you how these can be done. So you can just download some GIFs and just start to look how the animation is done, how the frames are actually moving. It's Unreal Engine logo which I created. So I was my interest was how this light movement was implemented. So here I just downloaded the GIF and imported it into Sprite. And you can see in details how this is done. Actually, then you look it into like frame by frame. It's not that difficult to make. Actually, you can just create another scene with a similar effect, by just knowing how the effect works. So that's why I recommended you use a lot of references and looking at the real games. And this is a really nice animation. You can just play it, which looks kind of stunning, in my opinion. Yes, let's get back to. So you have Terraria and Titan Souls here. So the third method is just to take the reference from real games. Maybe take their style if you really like their style, but just don't steal the artwork. That's the thing. And some few ideas about the lighting. Again, getting back to our initial scene that I created, you can notice that I created the shadows. Actually, I can say that's ambient occlusion in 2D, because it's including this. Yes, it's actually real ambient occlusion, which I drawn by hand. It's including some edges near the objects and in this ceiling. So the idea here is that lighting can be pre-drawn. If you, for example, using a 2D game engine that doesn't know about 3D, yes, the Unity and Unreal Engine are actually the 3D game engines, and they have no ability to do the raw 2D and that's why they are imitating 2D games in the 3D space. So you can just draw the shadows on the object, but yes, this scene is initially created, but you can just create the shadows as a transparent tiles and apply it to any image you want. The normal mapping, I really like, personally I really like normal mapping because it's widely used in 3D, in the 3D modeling and creating stuff. So I hope someone of you knows about 3D normal mapping.
Yeah.
I guess people who have some background with 3D modeling must know about normal mapping. It's because it's a really cool technique. I don't want to go really into technical description of how the normals work, but just for now know that this is a normal map. and this is how it's applied. It's a this is a mesh. This is a 3D object, which is highly detailed. And when we use it in a game, for example, the processor is having, the graphics are having a really tough, really hard time to process. Like how many triangles does it have? A lot of them. Really hard time just processing a huge amount of vertices. Lots of details are really hard to process. But we can downscale this, make it less polygonal, and then bake the high detail mesh into the low detail. That needs some clarification in the field of a 3D modeling lecture, which I guess in the channel, my last lecture, I described this topic in detail, how the normal maps are work in the 3D space. But let's just assume that the normal maps are things which can make a plane objects be affected, make them able to be affected by light, as just introduce some shapes onto the plane objects, and that the normal maps look like purple things. Maybe you've seen this, some kind of references. This is also a really cool screenshot from the game The Siege in the Sandbox, which showing how the normal maps are applied. These are not 3D objects, but just pixel art, the plain pixel art, and it has like a color map and the invisible normal map, which is used to calculate lighting. And as you can see here, that actually looks really nice. For the pixel art game, it introduces a volume, and in a whole scene it looks really, really nice. So you can have, for example, give a character, for example, a torch, and he'll go through the dungeon, and all the rocks on the wall will be visible, will be affected by the light, and you will have a strong feeling about the volume. And this is a really nice example of that. So, yes, this I created the normal map for my character, and I also show it how they work in some scene. How do I create actually normal maps? At first, I want to warn you about the filtering and stuff. The filtering is the many editors like GIMP, for example, like many game engines also use filtering of the sprites they are imported. What's filtering is just trying to make pixelated objects more high resolution. That's ruining our pixel art. And you should also fix it in your game engine. For example, in Unity, you just have to set a pixel perfect setting so you can see pixels and not a blurry stuff, because game engines are trying to blur the images that you're thinking that are intended to be high resolution. Yes, that's just a quick note. The first method to create normal maps from a sprite is from a grayscale. You can just take your artwork, for example, this is the character, and I just apply grayscale filter to it. But after that, we can put this normal map that's generated. It looks like this. Yes, that's actually the real normal map generated from this grayscale. But how the normal mapping generators work? They actually take some height map and try to generate normal map. And in this case, it would be a really bad idea to just take the grayscale and apply normal map to it, because in this case, the white pieces would be like in front of the characters, and black pieces will be on the bottom of the character, and this will be resulting in effect of these black pieces to be like inserted in the character instead of the different thing, because the colors are very rarely represent the actual state of the object shape. And now, okay, let's go into the real example. Let's look at just the normal maps created from the grayscale images that I actually used in the first place for the demo scene that I created some time ago. Okay, let's make it like this. This is demo scene that's showing you the scene with that character, and here we can see this pre-drawn lighting, pre-drawn shadows, but also we have these lights. It does have a mouse? I hope so. We have a light here, light source, which is affecting some artwork more. And if you can see, this character is actually affected by the light non-uniform because it has some normal maps applied to it. For example, if you look at this edge of the character, is actually lit, but if you turn it on the other side, this edge of the character is lit. So this effect is very slight here because here I used the grayscale conversion, but I'll show you how you can improve this style, making it much easier and much more noticeable. This is just a grayscale conversion that you should know. The thing here is that we can create normal maps just by taking our initial image and don't do anything, just convert it. But in case of the manual creation of normal maps, we should manually draw another character, just noticing the details. It's taking much time. But grayscale conversion has the advantage that it's quick. So, okay, let's just go back for a minute. We'll return to this demo later. So the grayscale conversion can be used as a quick driver if you want. Which is the much better way is to do height maps. This is the same thing, but the heights of the character are created by hand. So I just took the volume in my head and just created the white pieces are in front of the characters, in front of the character, and here you can see the face is more brighter than the neck. That's creating some volume, and later it can be converted. I use the pink background to make it visible because it would be on the gray background of the editor. And so the height maps are much better than converting from grayscale, although they require much time to create because you need to create all these height maps for each of the frame in the animation. But it's kind of less tiring than the next method that I'll show you. To have the little mistake A, it should be B. Okay. So the height maps. So the height maps are good. Kind of more work than just converting from grayscale, but the results are much better because, but just by looking at this normal map, you can see that the volume is much more correct just by general look. And the third method is this is also an example so from the Siege and the Sandfox, which they show the whole guideline how to create it. This is the hand painted normals. Is just creating a normal map by hand. So a normal map has some colors which you can apply, and for example in Sprite, if you want to create some normal map for this, for example, I'll just create this new layer, and it has new version has a normal map color wheel. So you can see this normal map wheel. So you can just take a neutral color, for example, and draw it like this. Take some other colors. So you can just use these colors to draw them manually. So this is the third method, to make them completely manually. This is requires some training. You cannot just start drawing because you don't understand the normal maps initially. You need to have some idea of it. But using this guide, looking at the color wheel, normal color wheel in Sprite, you can try to create some cool stuff. But but it takes a lot of time to create manually, because they're taking, for example, the color for the right side. At first, they paint it like this here, like edges. Then they're outlining the other edges. Then they are creating some more normals, and finally, it's kind of tiring. But that gives actually the best result. That's also the comparison from the CH and the Sandfox, which they have made. This is for the hand-painted normal maps. There's the grayscale conversion, and also some algorithm of shape recognition. But as you can see, the much better result on the grayscale conversion, you cannot see much of the happening, because, and even it's a good example for grayscale conversion, but it's still very not noticeable at all. But for hand-painted textures, hand-painted normal maps, you can see that this looks kind of nice, actually. So this is the third method for the normal map creation. Oh, that was... Okay, I have one more method. Oh, no, I have... I've returned to the lighting. Also, there's a field that I already mentioned. This is voxel art. And this is a screenshot from a Magic Voxel editor. Voxel are just like volumetric pixels. And I wanted to recreate this the same character in the voxel art. There is kind of a problem with voxel art animation, because usually the game engines are treating animation as the deformation of some kind of the object, some kind of a mesh, but the vertices, the amount of vertices doesn't change. But in this case, there would be new voxels introduced in the next frame, and so the actual shape, the actual object, the whole object is changed each frame, so it's a little bit harder to reproduce. I wanted to create a small plugin for the Unreal Engine that would be treated like this, but I didn't have much time to do this. What my idea is to create a real animation that will take different frames as a different voxel 3D objects, and play it like in a real animation. And my initial interest for the voxel art, and this time I'm talking about not just like 3D voxel art, but voxel art used as a lighting method for the 2D game. So as you can see here, I imported this into Blender and trying to render some light, but it looks kind of terrible, because the light is not per voxel. The per voxel lighting is like having one voxel lit at a time. But that needs some refinement, some work on it. I also hope to create this add-on for the Unreal Engine to be able to work with voxel art as a 2D pixel art. And yes, this is the video. Hope it's playing. No. As you can see here, this is another example of voxel art, which is used to create in a 2D scene. But here we have the camera will be looking from this side on the object, and we have much more voxels on the invisible dimension. It has much more flexibility for the lighting to work. Okay, just go to YouTube. The internet is slow here. Yes. So this is the video that I initially found on YouTube. Yes. So here we can see the voxel model, which is actually used to be projected on a 2D plane, and also that's an example in Unreal Engine, and it has per voxel lighting. And the per voxel lighting, I guess, in Unreal Engine, it's achieved by writing on shaders, and the effect of this could be really nice. So you can see this 2D, this cool 2D object. But again, talking about animations, it would be kind of hard to implement because the constant switching of the objects would be, maybe it would be like some defects. So it is a topic that is not highly developed in the game engines, but that's the opportunity for the developers to come and implement, for example, the plugins for voxel art animations, for like per voxel lighting in Unreal Engine or maybe in Unity. That's a good opportunity for you. You can, if you're interested in this topic, you can work on it because it's not highly developed nowadays. And finally, we have some examples of the pixel art in modern game engines. We don't have much of the limitations from the legacy games, so we can attach anything to our pixel art games. For example, in the upcoming game The Last Night, which is made in Unity, they have I guess they have a really small team, but they joined some Microsoft Xbox program and they have hired some developers. So they're currently working on this cool game, and really looking forward to play it actually, because it has really nice visual style. You can search for the trailer of this game on YouTube, and it looks stunning actually. But as you can notice here, it's not like projection in the 2D, because yes, we have some notion of the camera. Do you know what's the difference between orthographic and perspective view? So the perspective view actually, when the camera is like, it's like in real world. When the objects are farther, they are smaller, and that's why if we, for example, get a cube on the table and look from the side, we can see that the further edge would be bigger than the back edge. That's the perspective. But in orthographic, all these projections, all the dimensions in the one projection look as the same dimensions. So in this example, they didn't use orthographic view, as orthographic view is used in many games, in almost all games, 2D art games, is used orthographic view. But here we can see that it's perspective. It's like more like a Minecraft, because they have objects made of the pixel art, but actually it's more like a 3D objects. That's not real. That's not real 3D models with just pixel art textures, because they actually used some layers of the textures which are just moving in perspective, and as a result you have nice image. Also, modern engines allow us to have nice blur in the background, nice water reflections, and also you can see here, I guess you cannot see here the character, which is also a rotoscoped character that is created based on the real footage. So we took a video and created animations through it. There is also a talk by one of the developers on the YouTube. I also include this in the lecture slides, references, so we can look for it. And this is the example from the Siege and the Sandfox game. They also have a talk about this game. They actually talk about how they decided to make the game in the Unreal Engine, because the actual team was not a new guys. They were AAA developers in the past, and they wanted to make a new game. They had a lot of experience in the game development, but they still decided to go with pixel art, because they really wanted to recreate that old style game in a new manner. And they introduced some more effects, more cool lighting actually, which Unreal Engine allowed them to. But again, this team is professional developers, and they use a lot of C++ code, native C++ code, to create the game. That's why they used Unreal Engine, because the Unreal Engine has a plugin Paper 2D, but it's, as I already said, it's not developed right now. If you download the latest game or latest release of the Unreal Engine, you'll see that it's written early stage, like early preview version in the editor of the Paper 2D plugin. So it's like not developed right now, but it's still cool. Although the Unreal Engine lacks the animation features for 2D, unlike Unity, we have a cool animation graph in Unity and nothing in Unreal Engine. So also you can join this development of plugins for Unreal Engine to make pixel art good for Unreal Engine, because currently it's kind of the more for 3D. And so also I wanted to mention some effect. That's the perspective, how we manage the perspective in the games. Here we have, in the last night, we have a real perspective. But for example, if we have real orthographic view, where all textures are of the same dimensions, and you don't have the perspective, what you can do is called a parallax effect, which I also want to show you as an example for, yes, this demo scene that I created some time ago, which has some actions. It's not important. I just want to show you the parallax effect and how I actually created it. Because if you initially make some texture in front of the camera and texture in the back of the character, and you have orthographic view, they won't be moving because they're orthographic. And here you can see that the scene has three layers. Actually, it's implemented as a script which actually detects the camera position, and moves the whole plane with the background according to the camera. So it moves like it moves more from the side of the actual movement. So this is called parallax effect. So that's all I actually wanted to show you. That, yes, the references. So do you have any questions? Okay.
I have a question about using real life, like you said, photos for references, because for me it's very hard to grasp how to simplify things. For example, if I want to draw a tree, for example, a tree is a sunny day. How do you approach using some tree photos for making some pixel art?
Actually, that's I saw a cool YouTube video that with using a GIMP, they actually a man have taken the image of the real tree. That was a tree. He just downscaled it in the GIMP, and applied a few of the GIMP filters. And after it, there are built-in algorithms that allow us for reconstructing the image. And as a result, he had a really nice tree, actually. But usually if you do rotoscoping, downscaling, you need some drawing manually. I mean that if you, for example, as you have asked, if you just go and downscale an image, which I tried to create a real thing from, I guess there was a slide with the night. Missions.
No, as you said, we don't need to downscale anything. Just
So,
yeah.
if we downscale this Knight, we really have a problem, because I tried to turn this real image like on top of this downscaled version. This is just a downscaled version of it. It's really hard to work with. But I can send you the link to the YouTube that the guy actually used a tree. He actually applied some filters in the GIMP, and as a result, it looks some kind of good. But it actually depends on the object, because when you have some kind of a person, you really need. You don't have much of the pixels. So, for example, we just have like several pixels here, and we can outline the shape of it. We really need the shape. For example, we need to indicate where the eyes, where the mouth, for example, or there's no mouth. For a character, it's really difficult to do downscaling. But for a tree, actually, it would look like a brown stick with some kind of the green mass on top of it, and it would look good actually. And that's actually was the result of that technique that was used in the GIMP. So it really depends on the source image. But as I already mentioned, it's used actually the rotoscoping without a lot of refinement by the actual artists is used in the Prince of Persia game and some more games, I guess. Also in the modern game, that is upcoming game, The Last Night, is also used the rotoscoping for the characters. So with lots of refinement, it can be actually used.
What kind of refinement? So at first you downscale the image and then you draw like upon it?
Actually, when you downscale the image, personally I would approach it kind of differently. Because when you downscale the image, the algorithm already decides, the downscaling algorithm already decides for you which pixels will be in the final image. But you don't want that. I would do, for example, like take the whole image, for example, some kind of the character. Okay, just take some kind of image, and then which is not downscaled, and then manually divide it into the pixels, and by myself decide which color will be used in each tile without downscaling it. Mm-hmm. It will be more like this will be not a 1 pixel but like 100 by 100 pixel, but it will be solid. And later, when you have this kind of a division manually, you actually would have more flexibility on deciding which pixels will be there. And after that, we can downscale this resulting frame, for example, which will be like these pixels. So you do not downscale this image. You can just manually decide which pixels will be in the resulting thing. So, any more questions? So, I also promised to have a sprite tutorial. Then, so does anyone really liked the sprite? Does anyone already looked into it?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we use the pixel art and for like using the 3D, but you know Doom game, the old one? Like, can you use these programs to do something like I don't like to make a full 2D game, like I'm a 3D game, but it's really low resolution with it.
You think you're talking about the pseudo 3D?
I mean using this art for 3D, like the old Doom game.
Yeah, I've seen a few games like that. Actually, one of the Gen games from the Deacon Game Jam, a guy has made some Doom-like sprites of monsters, something like fish-walking guys, and a sticking pistol. And his game was like simple planes with low-resolution textures and those billboards of enemies walking around just like him. So I think you can do whatever you want because we don't have any technical limitations.
So yes, if you're talking about pseudo 3D like in the old Doom games, you mean like the first Wolfenstein style?
Yes.
So yes, you probably can use pixel art, but the thing is that the idea behind making the first Wolfenstein game was not to make pixel art, but to make the more graphics as they could. They have limitations, and we wanted to make graphics. They use some anti-aliasing techniques, some drawing techniques, but nowadays we want just to keep it very simple in a pixel art. Actually, yes, it's also called the pixel art, as in legacy games, but as in today games. But the idea behind the art can be really different. Oh. So, does anyone want to go for the sprite?
So, is anybody wanting to draw some pixel art in a sprite right now? Maxim can do a tutorial, basically, to help you draw it. So please raise your hand. If so.
You can just show the interface. However, it's already 2 hours.
Yeah, it's already 2 hours, maybe.
Everyone is tired, I guess.
Tired.
Yes.
Maybe we can hold the workshop.
So I'll attach some references and links in the slides and share with you. So.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah,
yes.
Thank you, Maxim.
So thank you.